In today's session, we'll discuss about one of the important protocol. And again, when you're talking about federation, single sign-on access management tool, all of these work primarily using a protocol. So there are some key protocol. The first one is SAML. Then you have OAuth. Then you have OpenID. Connect. Then you have WS Trust, WS Fed. Then you have Shibboleth also. Recently, there are some applications that are getting integrated with using Shibboleth. Okay. So primarily, these are protocols that help you with authentication, authorization, federation. I'll write it. SAML. Okay. Fine. So authentication, authorization, federation, single sign-on, web services. Okay. So this is where you use these protocol. Now, what is the origin of primary use cases of SAML? So let's start our journey today with SAML. SAML is a authentication protocol. Okay. And I'll go through the definitions and all of that while in a different slide. Here, I'll just give you a brief about what SAML is and all of that. Okay. So SAML, there are mainly three use cases why organization uses this protocol. And protocol, what is a protocol? Is a way in which, or a medium through which your data is exchanged, trust is created, data is transferred, all of that. Can someone name me one protocol that helps you fetch users, find users, search users in Active Directory?
Yep.
Yes, LDAP. Yes, absolutely. So similarly, you have SAML as another one of the important oldest protocol that you can say. Before SAML, you were using Kerberos, you were using again LDAP, all of this to perform authentication. But then with the SAML, it helped you with security, it helped you with convenience. It was a centralized protocol that was helping you do all the different types of flows that we'll be discussing. By the way, can anyone tell me who developed SAML? Any idea? Was it developed by a single person, or was it developed, or was it not developed by a single person? Any guess? Again, let's make this interactive, right? So you don't really have to be right. Was it a single person, or was it not a single person that developed SAML? Not a single
Not
person.
a single person.
Okay. So you
By
all
the
are right.
nature of question, it should be single person.
Okay. But yeah, it is not a single person. It is some security organization of easier. And what is the name of that organization? You can post it in the chat. So Shubhankar and Alka are not supposed to answer. Okay. Because I know you guys know already. And you guys are the trainer that you will be training in. So just to encourage others. So the name of the organization is OSS. Okay. And there are documentation out there. And these are the primary. This is an organization, like an open source organization. Similarly, you have OpenID, another organization which actually created this OAuth and all of this OpenID Foundation or something like this. So OSS is where this was a group of folks, developers working, and then they started the SAML. And currently, we do have 1.0, 1.1. Currently, we are at 2.0, SAML 2.0. Okay. So, but then again, what would you say? The enhancements are not happening too much because you have another protocol which is again growing. So SAML is quite good security perspective, configuration wise, all of that. It is not developer friendly, I would say, but yeah, this is where the entire concept of single sign-on protocol started. Okay, so three reasons why SAML was used so far. Three main use cases of organization. Like you guys talk about use cases, right? So the main three use cases is federation. you have to integrate from one system to another system. You use federation. Then you have single sign-on. Improve the security of the organization. You want to achieve compliance. What do? You integrate every application with a single identity provider, which in our case could be Okta Ping, and that is how you integrate and enable single sign-on. Okay. Then web SSO. If you have application running on web, again, you use SAML so that you can protect those applications. You may not be doing single sign-on, but again, here also you have browser-based SSO, and that's where you call the term as web SSO. Okay, any providing single sign-on functionality over the cloud. So these are the very high-level primary use cases that an organization uses SAML for. Okay, so now I'll just stop sharing and I'll go and share some slides. Right? Yes, Krishna, JOT will be a part of the OpenID auth connections protocol. Okay, JSON, web token, everything will be covered at that time. So let's start by this. You guys can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes.
fine. So SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. Now consider a scenario where you start working in a new company. What do? You get an email address. Yesterday we were talking about the email address and device and all the stuff, right? So you get an email address and you get a login to a dashboard. You're presented with multiple icons of different vendors like Salesforce, Jira, AWS. A lot of icons are there, and you just click on it and magic happens and you're suddenly getting access to those applications. This is where SAML comes into picture. One part of this is where your protocol helps you to perform single sign-on. Okay, SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. Now the definition is it's a security assertion markup language. Now when you talk about this, so eventually you'll see, right, this is a, what is this? This is a markup language which has assertion in order to provide security. Okay, and it is an XML based open standard for transferring data between two parties. So when you talk about SAML, there are always, the way SAML work is there are two parties involved. One is the identity provider, which in our case, in general, it is any access management tool. Keycloak, Okta, Ping, OneLogin, ForgeRock, any tool that your organization is using to hold the identity, okay, which actually is there to establish, define, prove the identity. Okay, this is where your identity provider comes into picture. Service provider, any application that you want to use, any application that your organization is using, finance, payroll, banking, anything, you just name it, that all those applications are called service provider. Okay, now what is a markup language? It is not a language like Java, C++ and all of this. This is a very human friendly language where you understand what is written in a very readable, human readable format. It basically contains simple words which says, which could be a URL, could be name of the email address, value of the email address, value of the attribute name, okay, some certificates. That's how that whole it contains. Okay, so markup language is a very human readable language. So you don't have to learn this language in order to understand SAML. But this is how two parties, which is an identity provider and a service provider, interacts with each other. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the terminologies. Okay, some of the terms that you should know before going to SAML. The first term we discussed is identity provider, a party or a system, okay, which performs authentication and passes the data to the service provider. It will say, hey, come to me. For example, we spoke about the security guard use case where you go to your office Your security guard checks the ID card and lets you inside the office. So what is it doing? It's checking, validating, and then letting you in. To understand that the same role that the identity provider is doing here. Service provider, the organization that trusts the identity provider, that trusts the security guard, that this person has validated the identity of the user outside the gate. That is why that person is allowed to come inside the campus. Okay. Service provider is using the service. So in our case, it is the applications. Any application would only allow users to get inside the application if it has been trusted at the identity provider level. Now, again, guys, how it is trusted, what it does, we have all of that covered in the coming sessions or the coming slides. Okay. So now let's go about, I'll not cover all the terminologies. I'll just go a little bit more in terms of understanding you this how SAML works. Okay. So far, I'll just stop here. Any further questions from anyone? Very good. Is it clear? Fine, everyone. Please, if you have any queries, raise your hands. I'll be happy to stop and answer.
Oh, one quick question actually.
Yes, Sujan.
So for the access management, we talk about SAML or OIDC, W Trust, right? So these are mostly focused on the cloud. So what about the Kerberos we're talking about? So what is Kerberos actually? So it is only for the on-prem app only?
No. See, these are all protocols. Okay. And protocols, it's a very good question, Sujan. And again, these kind of questions may arise when you talk about protocols. Okay. There is nothing like cloud or on-prem. Fine. Cloud on-prem can be a tool, but the way it works, okay. For example, if you go to your college, there will be a ID card validation. If you go to your office, there will be ID card validation. So that validation will remain whether you go to college, you go to office, you go to function, anywhere you go. There will be someone sitting and validating your ID card. Okay, so it is a basic functionality, the way it works. And that the way it works could be applicable for a system that is on cloud like Okta, or could be valid for a system which you are configuring on-prem like Ping Federate. Okay, or even SailPoint, Savient is cloud, SailPoint's on-prem version. So protocols do not have a barrier that they are only applicable on cloud and not when you're setting up everything on-prem, means on your local server. Okay, so that is one thing. Kerberos is one of the way in which you can attend single sign-on, which is one of again the oldest way. So initially you had LDAP, Kerberos. Okay, Kerberos I'll cover that maybe in the next session in a very detailed video. Let's talk about SAML. We'll also talk about Kerberos. We'll talk about other protocols also. But all of these are eventually helping you to log in seamlessly, but the way they work are all different. SAML has a assertion way, Kerberos has a TGT, TGS way. They have a ticket granting server, ticket granting ticket. It gets issued, and using that ticket, it is again valid for a specific period of time. You get access to your desktop application. That is applicable only if you are connected to a domain. So there are again layers to that, but all the protocols work in any type of tool. There is no segregation whether on-prem or cloud. Does that answer your question?
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Okay, but we will cover that also.
Yes,
Kerberos
yes.
also. Okay. So yeah, any further question before I move? Okay, fine. So now let's talk about this. How does SAML work? Imagine this is a user. Okay. This user wants to log into an application. Now this is an application. This is the SP. We know IDP and SP. Okay. So let's see. This is the identity provider. IDP. Consider this as any tool. Any tool that you want to consider, just think. And every tool works the same way. So you have IDP and you have SP. This is the user. The user wants to log into an application. Okay. What would it do? It would simply go to the application. There'll be a form. They will put the username and password. What happens after that? Anyone wants to guess?
Authentication.
Yes, authentication. Now let's talk about how. The authentication means you will see a page on the SP saying, hello, welcome, right? But what happens on the back end? Let's understand that. As a user, you put your username and password here. This form will redirect you to the identity provider. Identity provider has, I'll go very high level and then we'll do a little bit of dissecting. Okay. Identity provider will say, hey, wait, I want to know your domain. Hence, you'll put your email ID, your unique ID, all of that. Okay, that check is done. Once that check is done, it'll go and check against its database here. Okay, and return a value and say, okay, the check is done. This user one exists on our database here. Okay, then they'll say, they'll forward a request or a response back to the service provider with the user information that it got from here. Service provider validates it, confirms back, says, fine, this user you have authenticated, I have authorized, then only you see hello. Okay, clear so far here?
Yes.
Fine. Okay. Now, again, I'll come back to this because we'll go one by one. Okay. Imagine this is a user that wants to log into an application. The first request will be the identity provider that it would go to. Okay. And then the identity provider would validate against a database. It would fetch some user information, send it back to the service provider validates, confirms, and then shows the user that you are the right set of user.
And
Okay, now let's move on to some of the different components of SAML. Okay, so there is something called as profile. So SAML has profile, SAML has binding, SAML has protocol, SAML has assertion, they have authentication, content, context, and metadata. Okay, so the first one is profile. Sorry, there are some background noises. Let me mute everyone. Okay, I think it's done. Thank you very much. So first we have the profile, and this is the structure of SAML. So you have profile where you have assertion, protocols, bindings to support that. Now this whole is a profile. Under profile you will have bindings. Some of the common bindings are post, artifact, redirect. So you have post, artifact, redirect. Okay. Post is directly just posting it. One sec, I'll do. Fine. This is post where you are trying to post data. Redirect is, for example, a request is going to the service identity provider. From there, if it redirects to the service provider, that is where you use redirect. Artifact is a very important thing which I'll cover a little bit later. Okay, this is mainly done for security purpose. Okay, so you have bindings, you have protocol, request and response for obtaining assertion, authentication, attribute, and entitlement. This is so inside the profile you have binding, like the way in which you would send the request. Protocol is the way the request would be sent and information will be exchanged. Okay, when the information is exchanged, there is some data that you get. That is what we call as assertion, and that assertion will actually help you to perform authentication, authorization, and then these kind of functionalities. Authentication context is also a part of the entire SAML framework, where it helps you understand the type of authentication. Okay, I'll go in deep around all of this. Then the extract of SAML, the thing that gets exchanged between two set of user, which is identity provider and SP. service provider is called metadata. That is what is called metadata. The metadata is the one that get exchanged between two parties, and eventually you are able to build the trust. Okay, so that is how all these terms are really helpful. This is inside what goes inside SAML, what is inside the entire functionality of the way SAML works. Okay, now let's talk about, so here I'll extract, guys please mute yourself. So I'll extract this bit here. So you see a connection here, right, between these. So I want to talk further more in detail in this particular slide. Okay, so you have the identity provider, you have the service provider. What happens is, let me just, so here, just a sec, guys. So when you talk about a user, okay, let's talk about SAML here. You have the SAML protocol. Okay, so as I said, how does that work? First, information, someone tries to access the application, it comes to IDP, IDP will validate. Now where does it validate? It validates here in the database. What does the database has? Discard. I'll just start writing it, okay, so that it makes sense for everyone. So this IDP, this usually contains information like username, email, first name, last name, email, employee number, all this information. Okay, and when a user is coming back to me and asking for some data, okay, IDP's role is to go and check its internal database, fetch that information. Okay, and again, if you consider a service provider is an application, and they will also maintain some information. So over there, they may just have email, first name, last name. Okay, imagine only these three information is. Now what happens is, this guy, when someone tries to access, will come to its own database, validate, and go back and share that information. Okay, it checks. For example, Kanishk logs in. Okay. Kanishk will put his username and password. His email could be kanishk@gmail.com and the password. Now it will take this password hash, go to the database, checks the username and the combination of the hash backend on Active Directory. You can consider this as being AD. Okay, the Active Directory or any directory where your user information is stored. Once the authentication is successful, your username password combination is matched, this will retrieve some set of information based on the connection ID. So every connection will have some unique functionality or some way, a unique way to understand or know who the SP is or who the IDP is. Okay, for example, you guys know me as Ravi, and then I'll have an address. Similarly, you'll know Shubhankar, you'll know Alka, Naga, everyone, right? Everyone will have a unique way to know each other. That is what is called as name. Now, in case of SAML, we call that as entity ID. Okay, an entity ID is a globally unique name for a SAML entity, either an identity provider or a service provider. The first step in configuring any SAML deployment is to choose a permanent name for the entity. You have to first define what the entity ID is on both the side. And that is where, now you must be wondering, like, okay, if I'm putting my username and password, how does this guy know, this guy, IDP, that I have to send the request here only? This is where entity ID comes into picture. Okay, so it'll know, okay, the request has generated, the request will definitely have a URL. Okay, now that URL contains entity ID or some unique values which will say the request is coming for this particular application, which is SP2. Once you're done with the checking of username and password, send that request back to the service provider too for it to perform its authorization. This is where you do the authentication. Authentication is done here. After your authentication is performed using AD and done by the identity provider, it sends the information, whatever information this guy needs. Now, this guy is saying, I have only stored email, first name, last name. Send me just the email value. If this is what this guy has configured on its side. IDPs, I will only fetch email ID and will pass that email ID across to the SP. SP already has a database. The Kanishk's email is already there. It'll get this email ID, matches it against its database and says, okay, Kanishk is fine. We can give. Authentication is successful and I have received the data. Now, it could be the case that Kanishk's ID is created, but sometime you will see unauthorized error. That means Kanishk's ID was never given any permission. That is why you will see 404, 403 like this, unauthorized. Because nothing, no entitlements or no permissions were given to his ID. And this is where you give permissions also. Okay, and how do you request for permissions? Which tool comes handy here, guys? Anyone? Tell one IAM tool that helps you manage your permission. Yes, SailPoint. SailPoint, Savian, this is where they come handy. So if you don't have access, go to the SailPoint, request for the access and come back. Once the request is granted to you, then Kanishk will try again and he'll see, okay, now I have been given right set of access. Okay. So is this clear so far? Yes.
Yes.
No. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So this is done. How does SAML work? Now let's talk about. So SAML also they have. So this is how it works. Okay. Now SAML also has two types of flows. Okay. There are two ways. Yes. Any question?
Yes, I have one small question. So,
Yes.
when there is a SAML use, so user first will try to log in on service provider and it will redirect to IDP, or user at the first place only will log into IDP.
That is what I'm going to teach now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any further questions from anyone? Nishala, do you have any questions?
No,
This
no,
Ritesh
no.
had a question.
Yes.
What does the assertion we ideally contain? A SAML assertion.
SAML assertion contains, so these are the main things that it contains: bindings, protocols, assertion, authentication context, certificates. Okay. Anyways, I'll go through this in detail. Okay. When I'll open the metadata, I'll do the dissect individually, like one by one. Okay.
And just one more question. What is the difference between a signed and unsigned assertion?
Signed. So, for example, what is the difference between HTTP and HTTPS?
Okay, got it. Okay.
Fine. Okay. So now coming back to Praveen's question, there are two major ways in which a SAML works. Okay. So the first way is IDP initiated flow. Now what happens in an IDP initiated? What is IDP initiated? What is initiated? Can anyone tell me? What do you mean by initiated?
Starting point.
Started.
Simple. Yeah. Starting point. Okay. So if I'm saying this is IDP, this is SP. Now, again, this is dependent on application to application. And sometimes we can also, as consultants or organization, dictate what do we want to implement. But this is purely based on use cases, that which flow to choose. So sometimes what happens, the application does not support SP initiated, or the other way, in which user will be given a long or a short URL, which will be the IDP's URL. Okay, you are simply giving the URL. Okay, if I am asking you to hit on www.google.com, will you go to YouTube?
No.
But if I ask you to log into gmail.com or Google, log into Google, and from there if you click on YouTube, will you go to YouTube?
Yes.
So, or if I give you the YouTube's link directly, will you go to YouTube?
Yes.
So, this is just try to think from that perspective. In the first case, you are being given the URL of the authenticating party, the identity provider, and you have been presented with the username and password screen, eventually sending a request directly to IDP. A URL will be given, okay? And the moment you hit that URL, it directly goes to the identity provider. And any flow that starts whereby it is giving you the URL of the identity provider, that flow is called IDP initiated flow. Okay, so what happens is you will be given the URL, you click the URL, automatically there is a request, there is a IDP will start generating a SAML assertion. Now, once again you complete the authentication, all of that, a SAML response is built here. I'll show you the response also. Now that SAML response is transferred back to the service provider, and the service provider can check the response. It will be in the form of an assertion. It'll check the certificate, it'll check the entity ID, all the different values, certificate, and all of that attributes, and then decide whether this request that is coming, first of all, it is valid request or not. Anyone can hijack and send request, right? So that is also being checked, and then there are certain security tags I'll show you on the metadata, which actually helps you identify what how do you identify whether a request is a valid request or a forged request, all of that. Okay, then a response, here you will send a response is sent by the IDP to the SP, and SP receives that response, completes the authorization process, validates the user, and grants them access. So this is one way in which SAML works. The other way around is SP initiated flow. In this case, a user will be given link of salesforce.com, SP link, okay, jira.com, confluence.com, servicenow.com, all of that. Suddenly it'll go here. Again, this guy is not there to sit and authenticate. This guy will simply say, okay, you have come to me, but wait, I already have a system that is performing authentication on my behalf. And that system here is the IDP. Okay. So, and this is the SP. So in this case, there is a request that is being sent, and I'll show you when I log in, right, on the metadata, I'll show you the request also. So there is a request, sorry. So there is a request that the SP sends to the IDP. IDP does the same thing, goes to its backend database, checks the user found, authenticated, all of that, sends the response back. There you will see a request and a response combination, and the response will contain assertion. Okay, now assertion has mainly three different things. One, it has the authentication information. Mainly three things: authentication, attribute, and authorization. Okay, authentication means it will have all the ways like entity ID, ACS URL, all of that. Attribute, it has email address, first name, last name, whatever this guy requested, it'll have every information there. And finally, you have the authorization. It'll have group information also. Okay, and in the authentication, you will have certificates also. And there also you have two different types of certificate, which we'll discuss a little later. But authentication, assertion, and authorization. Okay, these are the attribute and assertion. These are three things that the response, which will be a SAML assertion, that it contains. So all these while the only way in which this data gets exchanged is not normal text. This is where all of the data is exchanged using a markup language, which is an XML base. If I open the metadata, you will find it in a XML base format. Okay, and hence assertions are XML based language, XML based. And eventually when you are transferring data from one party, identity provider, to SP, or SP to identity,